Now, I'm going to go to Eoghan Corry. He's the editor of Air and Travel magazine. Eoghan, obviously, good morning to you.
Good morning, Donald.
Eoghan, the green list of countries that are going to be relieved of any obligation to quarantine when coming back from and deemed safe to travel to. It's been delayed again until tomorrow, partly because Micheál Martin is at this EU summit and therefore cannot chair a cabinet meeting today. How significant is it, number one, that the green list has been delayed, and number two, that the green list is being published at all?
It's very hard to know at this stage because the flights are continuing regardless, Donald. We have 82 flights out of Dublin Airport today. We'll have something similar out of Belfast International. And Shannon and Cork will have a couple of flights going as well. People are waited for the green list and waited because remember the EU decided to open the borders on May the 27th, published a plan to do so. They implemented it on June the 15th, and here we are a month later and we still haven't decided where the government wants us to go and not go, and what's happened is people have just decided to go anyway.
For some people, myself included, I had a big holiday booked in June. The holiday obviously was cancelled. The flights were cancelled. Everything was cancelled. That's okay. There are going to be people now that have holidays booked for July, for August, that aren't being cancelled. The flights are running. The hotels are open. They've put down the money, and they're going to find themselves in a very difficult with decisions to make that I wouldn't envy.
Yeah, to say the least. We reckon there's nearly €1 million a day being lost by people who put money into holidays that are no-showing. The reason they're no-showing is the government hasn't decided to tell people where to go, and there is a DFA, a Department of Foreign Affairs advisory against all but essential travel. That means that don't block the flights, but it means that things like travel insurance don't apply, and it also stresses people. People don't want to be going against public policy. Public policy is very hard to tell as well, Donald, because in the absence of any government policy, we have a merry-go-round of medical opinion showing up on the airwaves and in newspaper articles giving personal opinions. Don't travel abroad this year. We'd a couple of cabinet ministers saying the same. This is not government policy. What we have a directive from the European Union on how to reopen borders, but Ireland seems to have absented itself from that policy. It didn't participate in the policy, didn't decide not to participate either. It just let this vacuum, and into the vacuum steps an awful lot of personal opinion. Very, very stressful for people, and I can tell that a lot of people now are forfeiting a lot of money. It's really somewhat patronising for people to say, spend your money at home this year, go on your home holiday, when they've already lost all the money on their foreign holiday. For some of the politicians in Leinster House, it's beyond their comprehension that people don't have that amount of money to spare.
And from the point of view of travel insurance, and this is an important one, and you did touch on this, but I think it's something that does bear repeating. A lot of people will be thinking, well, I'm not going to go on the holiday, but it's okay, I have travel insurance. It's not that simple.
The travel insurance is really funny because it's been treated almost on a case-by-case basis. Travel insurance used to be fairly straightforward. There are 4 levels of travel advisory, Donald. One is it's safe to travel. The second one is take reasonable caution. The third one is only essential travel. And the fourth one is sort of for Syria or Libya, do not travel at all. So most travel insurance is stashed up in the old days, which is, in our case is up to the beginning of March. You used to be able to say, the first 2 are covered, the essential travel and do not travel are not. What's happened is all of the world is now in level 3, avoid all but essential travel. And that used to be for somewhere where there was a conflict or something going on that, would make life dangerous for you. And it's applying to the whole world. It's applying to Malta. It's applying to Spain. And people in the travel insurance industry are claiming and getting some of the claims through and not others, because it does appear that they're taking it by case basis. That, Donald, is absolutely useless to someone with a young family trying to make a decision. Do I go? Am I covered? Am I safe? The one thing within Europe that does give you a little bit of a safety net is the European Health Insurance cards, the EHIG card, the blue card. A lot of listeners will be familiar with it. That is being honoured. It's under separate legislation across Europe. It means if you get sick, you turn up at a local hospital and you're covered. But to describe it as a mess is an understatement in terms of people trying to make decisions about travel.
And also in terms of if someone decides not to travel because of the government advice, they won't necessarily be able to claim the cost and the money they've lost back from their travel insurance company, because the travel insurance company will argue, hang on a tick, the flights are going, the hotels are open, you could take it if you wanted to.
That's exactly it, Donald. Your case was nice and clean, nice and clear-cut, flight cancelled, everybody knows what's going on. Now the flights are going, people are being said, OK, you mightn't have your 12 o'clock flight to Malaga, it's moved to 3 o'clock, but that doesn't mean that you get your money back. And to add to the complication, there's all sorts of contradictory policies by the airlines. June the 10th, if you book before June the 10th with Ryanair, you're charged a change fee. You can change, of course you can change, but you'll be charged a whack of a change fee. If you book since June the 10th, you aren't. It's a measure Ryanair brought in to reassure people who were booking for their July the 1st, their big takeoff of 40% of their fleet back in the sky. But unfortunately, they didn't retrospectively apply. So a lot of people who booked way in advance are facing change fees, which can double the price of what they're looking at, the original flights they were looking at.
Are you in any way confident that the announcement that is made after tomorrow's Cabinet meeting will add any more clarity to the situation, particularly in terms of the green list? Presumably we will have the list. At that point in time, will it make things any clearer, or will this confusion continue?
The answer is no. I actually think this will not bring the clarity. And the reason is the conflicting messaging, cabinet ministers, the merry-go-round of medical opinion, all that we've been hearing over the weekend. It's not sure, we're not clear whether the Department of Foreign Affairs advice against all but essential travel will even apply to the Green List. It's not even sure who's in the Green List. I mean, the metric that EFSET want is countries with a lower rate of infection than Ireland. That's a bit mischievous because they know there are only 8 countries on that with very low connectivity to Ireland. So it effectively serves no purpose whatsoever. There are about 5 countries we know that will be definitely off the list because the EU metric for measuring this is 20, and some of them are over that. They would include Portugal, which is significant out of Ireland. They would include Bulgaria and Romania, which have quite a large immigrant population or migrant population in Ireland, and Croatia as well. The problem then is the bits in the middle. If we have a very hardline list, it might even exclude Germany and France. Poland, there are 120,000 Polish living in Ireland and Britain. They would be somewhere over 10. And then Spain is just inside the 20. And then it gets more complicated even, Donald, because if the Canary Islands were a country in their own right, which in many cases they are, they're not in the duty-free, for instance, they would be well within the list, the Green List. And the Algarve would also be within the Green List, and most people go to Portugal. Only less than 15% of Irish people go to Portugal, go to the rest of the country outside the Algarve. So you've got this almost using a mathematical metric, a crude mathematical metric, is almost nonsensical. And to answer your question, do I think things will be clarified by the Green List or not? I have no confidence that they will be clarified. The
other complication, of course, is, and Greg, my colleague, has been getting calls every day on this for the past 2-3 weeks. Every call saying pretty much the same thing. There are American tourists in my area. There are UK tourists in my area. They haven't quarantined. They've not been following any form of rules. Why the hell should I follow rules when I see them being flouted all around me?
The American thing is it's a little bit sad to see the stigmatisation of America. We've had over nearly 26,000 coronavirus cases in Ireland. Not one of them is from an American tourist. The whole way that, there are something like 40,000 Americans living in Ireland, and you can see all over social media they're being stigmatised and attacked on the street, people who have American accents. We have managed to work ourselves into a pitchfork and flaming torch frenzy over American tourist problem, which doesn't exist. The number of tourists in the country, anybody in the hospitality business will tell you, is tiny. The cars, the English red cars that are being resented on the way, the tourism is at a very, very low level. But the reality is that when you pick out something to do What are we going to do about our corona? And remember, our 1,700 deaths, thousands of them in nursing homes. Who are you going to sort of look to do something about this? Travel is being responsible for 1.6%. And you would think it was responsible for 50 or 60 or 70% by the calls coming into not just your station, but every station and the Twitter storm that's around it. Travel is responsible for 1.6% of the cases we've had. And that's pretty much normal across Europe. It's not being travel. It's not being international visitors. And the hotspots for international tourism, like the Algarve, like the Canary Islands, have very low caseloads. Even in Lombardy, at the height of the crisis, when Lombardy was the black spot of Europe, the resort towns around Lake Garda had the lowest caseloads. It's like in the absence of, in the terrible stress that our community, we as a community are going through, and we're running around and looking for a solution. It's like that people are lighting on the fact that American tourists are bringing in the coronavirus is a solution. And what that does is, you can understand people's anger, and when it turns up on Twitter and all of that, it's of great interest to us. But when it turns up in the New York Times, as it did last week, that Ireland is an unwelcome place for Americans, that's when it starts going the long-term damage. Decisions are being made, Donald, on next year's air routes at the moment. And one of the airlines that was going to come into Shannon decided last week, we're not doing Shannon in 2021 or 2022 because of the antagonism towards American tourism.
So you're saying that this could effectively undo 3-4 years of trade fairs and flesh pressing and everything else?
You can overstate it as well because, in times of crisis, people say strange things and people react in different ways. But the narrative, which is controlled by Infos, like these guys have the daily press conference and massive coverage and instant access to the airwaves, which is right. I'm not complaining about that at all because the scale of the crisis is as big as any of us remember in our lifetime. But, when we have, is travel and the threat from travel meriting 70 and 80% of that airtime? When there are the other, when we have healthcare workers out on their feet, unable to cope with long shifts, wearing the PPE, coming back and taking their clothes outside in the street and having to shower and not being able to hold their children and being stigmatised by their own family. We work in a nursing home. We don't want to see you. When we've all of these things, I think there is the fractures and failings in our response to this and the failings of the health system. It suits people who have presided over that to have the entire narrative driven by travel and, I saw someone with an American accent. Most of the imported travel routes are not from American routes, by the way. There's one particular airline and one particular route has brought almost all the travel-related cases into Ireland. The countries they've come from, places like Bangladesh, Pakistan, the famous one in Iraq and Sligo, they're returning people and people returning to live in Ireland. And that has been the international trend. We know this because looking across Europe, it has been the returning resident, not always the citizen, but the resident in the country, that has been responsible for most of the imported cases. Malta had their cases down to zero. When they reopened their routes, their international, they got 3 cases in, returning residents. And there's going to be returning residents, but at some stage, we got to reopen the borders. And the one question for all those people who are fans of quarantine and shutting the routes is, what happens next? When do you decide to reconnect? In March, Ireland is one of the most connected islands in the world, and we're going to face this problem. When do we reconnect with the rest of the world on a meaningful level? The airlines have already done it. The government is still tossing up and down notions of Greenlist and debating it. It's quite fascinating to watch if we didn't have an inbound tourism industry which was out on its feet and 200,000 jobs at stake, Donald.
Finally, and very briefly, Eoghan, because I know you do need to get away. The government and the travel agencies, I notice, instead of offering straight refunds, are offering a credit note scheme that seems to be underwritten by government. Is that something you would support and recommend?
Absolutely, but it's not in law. And the thing is, we have different versions of it, and we have local versions of it being floated. We need some what we need is is some sort of oversight of all of this system, that it works in a coherent manner, and that it is equitable in its distribution and its supply. And that process hasn't been completed yet. But there's no doubt anything that mobilises Irish people to go and visit their own country and try and save what little bit of the season is left for the Irish tourism industry is not just a good idea, it's one of the best ideas. It's an idea that future generations will thank us for.
And hopefully then the money that the travel agents, instead of giving back cash refunds, have taken hold of that cash as part of this credit note fund that's underwritten by government as well. At least it'll take some of the pressure off the travel agents in terms of their cash flow as well, because a lot of those are going to be in trouble.
I may have misread your question there. Now, the outbound industry credit note scheme is terrific. It gives that option of pushing those 2020 holidays into 2021, relieving all that stress. And if at the end of 9 months, if you have decided that you need the money, a lot of people's household finances have changed dramatically, the money is there to take it back.
And in the meantime, there is a lot to explore on this island of ours, and a lot of places you can go, and a lot that can be done. Eoghan Corry, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Eoghan, you're a gentleman. Thank you. That's Eoghan Corry there. He is an expert on these matters, and it's interesting to get Eoghan's perspective on that. And just to repeat that, you may notice that what you're getting from your travel agent, an offer if you have a refund outstanding, and I know it's been taking 2, 3 and possibly even up to 4 months to get refunds processed from some companies. You may find yourself, instead of being offered a straight cash refund into your bank account, you'll be offered a credit note. And effectively that is underwritten by government. You can choose within 9 months to cash that out if you wish, or it'll hold for actual repayment on future holidays into 2021 and 2022, and something maybe that'll take the pressure off the travel agents, because we know the travel agencies themselves are in a difficult position at the moment, because no one at this point in time is booking, and effectively all the travel agencies are doing at the moment is processing refunds and giving people money back, and until they start getting money in, it's going to be a difficult time for that industry too. It's 27 minutes to 10 o'clock.
Text